Hey guys, Stealth here. Let's have a look at some US Marines. In case you've never played this map before, you may not have seen it because it is a huge map. It has a ton of zones, most of which are on either side of the bridge except for Echo. This zone is always quite heavily conflicted or contested in the sense that you're going to see two types of command vehicles in here. Usually one from Blue 4 on this side and Red 4 on that side, depending of course on which side they spawn. We're going to be following Maverick 98 in this replay, and as he's setting up I still have one question to ask you guys. Wonzo asked me if I could change or if I could also add my weekly War Room video as an MP3 file in a sort of podcast format. Is this something that you guys would like? If yes, give this video a comment with yes please or podcast please, something like that. So I have a way of counting exactly whether you would like it or not. Other than that, of course, I will just upload the video, which is just me rambling about what happened during the week, Wargame in general, video games, etc., and other stuff that concerns the channel. So if you'd also like to have that as a podcast, so you can maybe listen to it while, I don't know, working or exercising, let me know, and I'll also add an MP3 Monday to the War Room episode description. Anyway, Maverick here is opening up with quite a heavy infantry and AA push. He's using an airborne, a US Marines deck. So we got Super Cobras with longer range AA missiles, Twin Hueys with napalm troops, Twin Hueys with AA infantry, Recon Cobra, probably Rangers in that Huey, Command Infantry, and quite a few LVTP 7A1s with very, very angry Marines in there. He's going to try and get across, and the description that he gave with his gameplay is that there's going to be a ton of juggling with infantry. So this could be for some, or this could make for some interesting reconnaissance or interesting micromanagement video material. Let's have a look at how he's going to play this. Unfortunately, he lost his Phantom 2, but the Phantom 2 did the job it was ordered to do. It did napalm this area and block it off effectively. So that in the meanwhile, he can push up with helicopters which are at no risk of being engaged by AA units or infantry yet. Super Cobra here blew a helicopter out of the air here, and MI8 also killed the infantry in sight, which was worth 25 points. Should make it a bit easier on this flank. But getting to these side flanks, if you're not using an airborne deck, is going to take some time. And personally, I've even had it to the extent where I was using I believe it was South Korean or Japanese deck. And this map is so big that it's going to take your units 5 minutes real time to get to the front line. As well as with the low autonomy that Japanese units have, they may not always exactly make it to the front lines without being refueled. So that is something that you do need to keep in mind when using this map and the type of deck that you decide to use on it. A couple of Hueys here are, and this is interesting, engaging grounded MI8s, and unfortunately just got shot down by Strela 3. And definitely Bravo has control of Bravo. Red 4 has control of Bravo until now, because we're going to see quite a few infantry units here. From the 19th Panzer Grenadiers Division, 59th Regiment. That's quite the username. In the meanwhile, Maverick is pushed up with Delta Force, Navy SEALs, US Marines. There is definitely a Red 4 unit that's going to engage them. As you can see, they've got Scrajets over here. But other than that, Blue 4 has pretty solid control over this area. The one thing I'm worried about is the AA, that they don't really have a lot of. They got one group of Stingers, and that's it. There's of course one Hawk back there, but that's not really any good if you're dealing with an AA push. And a couple of helicopters could make it very difficult for this infantry force in here. T-80Bs are pushing up, and they're trying to wipe out those LVTPs. Not successfully though, as the Marines are trying to use their AT-4s. Which they're now finding the lack in range of. At only 700 meters, they just cannot reach out and touch that tank. In the meanwhile, I think that Red 4 has this area pretty heavily fortified with BTR-80s, Scrajets, VDVs. So there might also be Spetsnaz in here. And I think that we're going to see Spetsnaz on Navy SEAL action a bit later. Reinforcements are coming up. The Cobra has been rearmed with the AIM-9M missiles. It does have the TOW missiles, so let's hope it can actually engage that T-80 before the T-80 starts causing trouble here. And I'm also expecting the command infantry. Yeah, there it is. The command infantry is inside the zone, but as predicted, there is, I believe it was a BTR-80K, I think, command vehicle, or BMD-1K. It's in the buildings here. It's pretty heavily defended by VDVs and Spetsnaz, so they're not going to get in here anytime soon to kill that unit, unless they're going to use AA, an AA strike. So any kind of bomber run is going to make it quite difficult on this unit. Super Cobra managed to take out the T-80, and is now taking quite a lot of fire from these crash jets. Did manage to kill one of them. You're going to see a bit of a discrepancy here. These guys have a range of 2450. Super Cobra is going to be shooting back at you at 2625, so there is definitely an advantage here for the Super Cobra. And these crash jets are going down one by one. Now Maverick here called in an M60, but you can see that it is taking its sweet time actually getting there. And that's considering that Echo here in the middle is one of the most forward zones, or the most easy to reach zones that you can get. The other zones are even more resource or time intensive to get to. Let's pay brief attention here to the Panzer Grenadiers that are flanking around. We got a recon unit here, or at least probably these are going to be God, what's their name again? Fernspayers, as well as I think Fallschirmjäger 90. So they're trying to flank around, possibly trying to find the CV in Foxtrot. And so far, Red 4 is not challenging them because they probably don't even know those helicopters are there. So very, very nice push by the 19th Panzer Grenadier Division. Cobra is making it back to base, or at least he's limping away. Completely out of ammo except for the 40mm grenades. But heavily, heavily damaged. And he's lucky that this thing made it out alive. M60 has arrived on the scene, and he's already bringing in... he's not bringing in, this is what I saw on the minimap. The Super Cobra here, that's being refueled, rearmed, and especially refilled with TOW 2 missiles. So let's see what Red 4 is bringing in the meanwhile. Let's switch it to neutral. For the middle, they don't really have that much. Not as much as I was expecting. They got a bit of BMPs here, a couple of T-55s, but I'm not sure where those are headed yet. Let's see, they are controlled by Axion, and these units are not. These are controlled by Kriegsmarine Molly Mold. So we're going to not see those T-55s here probably. They're in, I think, reinforcing this position. So let's switch it back to Maverick. Delta Force tried to do a push and got completely eradicated by both the BTR-80s here, the BMDs, as well as the VDV. So they got no chance of going in there. And now we're going to start to see infantry juggling, as he called it. He's going to move infantry back and forth as they're being resupplied by M35 cargos in the middle of the town. And it's going to be a constant meat grinder battle. Who can resupply their infantry forces first? Personally, I would have moved these SEALs out of here already, because they're only 2 guys. And they're very, very expensive. As well as pretty scarce at only 30, or only, I believe, an availability of 8 if you devote 2 cards to it. Not sure why he's not using those LVTPs, because they do have the range to stay well outside the range of the Spetsnaz and the VDV. So he could use these to suppress the VDV and the Spetsnaz and possibly even force them out of this little town up there. M60 took quite a hit. I'm not sure exactly what decided to take a shot at it, but it lost all but one of its hit points. And unless he's going to bring in some more infantry, it's going to be a pretty standoff battle here. He's pushing up with assault engineers, and this is usually where I start to bring in mortars. I want to shock these guys, I want to stun them, I want to put up a smoke screen, and then I'm going to push with my marines. Of course, stunning these Spetsnaz or making sure that they are not going to be as effective as they normally would be is essential here. If you don't do that, these Spetsnaz are going to eat you alive, and that's what you see happen here, as well as with the TO-62 napalm tank that they have here. We got a BMPT that's pushing up, and unfortunately it is still outside the range of those Marines. So the Marines are getting flamed here by the Tu-62. BMPT does not have visual apparently, but it does force Maverick here to pull back. And with his M35s out of fuel or out of supplies, he's not going to be able to resupply any of these infantry units. And you can see that this Tu-62 is just casually napalming any kind of building that it has a visual at. This, in my opinion, is the exact use of the Tu-62 napalm tank. Just napalm whatever you see, try to force Blue 4 back, and once they're just, say, in this strip, come over with a heavy bomber with either 500 or 1000 kilogram bombs and nuke the infantry. Clear out that town. Seahawk here is operating and probably was the helicopter that killed off that napalm tank. But they're not exactly home free, because there is still quite a lot of AA here. And the AA managed to shoot down the Sea Cobra, or the Seahawk, which in turn lost the track of the missile, and the missile missed the Strop too. So a bit unfortunate, but I suppose it was deserved. Don't try to engage Strop 2, which is a very, very good AA platform with a Hellfire. It's going to get you anytime. Helicopters here that got sent back to the FOB have been repaired, and he immediately decides to pull those back before the Strop gets on the other side of them. In the meanwhile, Red 4 is reinforcing this position with MTLBVs, which can only mean more and more infantry as they're going to come in. I'm expecting VDVs in here. Might be something else, might be more Skyas, but I think it's going to be VDVs. Actually, it's going to be Concours. Concours M. Concours are quite annoying if they're solid in that position. But the good news is that Red 4 has absolutely no idea what's going on. Red 4 does not have recon, and they're going to know that, because you now see that those Concours cannot see the tank. If you would have had recon in here, Spetsnaz grew, just a reconnaissance like the Razvedkas, Blue 4 would have been in a lot more trouble, because they might have seen some of the infantry, they might have seen support vehicles here, they might have seen the tank, and this again highlights the importance of having good reconnaissance. If you don't have it, you're gonna pay for it with losses or lack of kills, and that's exactly what you see happen here. Scores are pretty tight. They are at the moment 2000 versus 1800, and Blue 4 up here is pushing up with their little skirmishing party, Volksjäger 90 as well as a BGS. Not sure why he decided to go with these. Personally, I would park a Fern Speyer somewhere along this road, or possibly over there if you can make it that far and detect it to have a very, very good visual of the enemy position. Let's see how Blue 4 is doing for the rest of the battle. They have solid control of Juliet, quite a lot of infantry in this building, and they're pushing it with Stormers and FSK, trying to force anything that's Red 4 out of this tree line. But of course, trying to push over an open field with a bit of infantry is risky. And that's where I would try and go with smoke first. You can smoke this tree line, the infantry is going to have a much easier time getting there alive. So again, guys, use smoke. If you don't use smoke, you're going to have to sacrifice your infantry. Over here on the right flank, I'm surprised no one has taken Delta yet. There's only one group of Highlanders there. It is worth 3 points, but Blue 4 seems to have just completely neglected this zone. Let's see if Red 4 has anything in here. No. Neither parties have anything in Delta except for a bit of Highlanders. And the same goes for Alpha. You can just try and go around the flank here, try to push in with helicopters, and you can quite easily neutralize this zone. As well as possibly capture this town, park an HGM there, and you have good control over these fields. Of course, again, it's easy for me to say because I'm not playing the game. I don't have to do anything but comment on it, and that's a very, I suppose you could call it a luxurious position for me to be in. Talking about recon, Blue 4 isn't doing too well either. They only have the Navy SEALs, which they parked in the middle of the town, so they're not going to be that effective at spotting. The only units that are really actively spawning are the Marines here, along the sides of this town, as well as the LVTPs, but they only have poor optics. So don't count on the LVTPs to really spot anything. A couple more Humvees are coming in. Let's see what kind of infantry they have in here. They might very well be Marines. They're not that heavily elite though. Only 3 bars. So let's see what's going to come out of that. Light Rifleman. Exactly what he needed. With the Marines you cannot reach out and touch any of these units. The Light Riflemen you can. They got the Super Dragons, a range of I believe 1900 meters. And you can see that they're already opening up. Probably trying to kill the BMPT. Good luck with that. This thing can eat those Super Dragons all day and laugh while it's doing it. The reason is a frontal armor of 15 and a damage done by the Super Dragon of 15. So they are more or less cutting through the armor, but mostly because it's just a heat round that they're firing. They're always going to do some damage. At this stage, I would be switching up the Light Riflemen with the US Marines to try and get shots on the BMPDs or the BTRs. You can see that even the BMP-1Ds are sturdy enough to take a missile from those Light Riflemen and survive. These things are quite survivable, and they're making life really difficult on Blue 4 with the grenade launchers. So, question for you guys: what would you use here if you have a US Marine deck? What unit could be useful in trying to defeat these vehicles out here? Just let me know in the comments. And think that you have the availability over virtually anything in the Blue 4 deck, so long as it's US Marines, of course. So think tanks, vehicles, maybe you want an ATGM in there, maybe you want a helicopter in there to support. Anything that you can consider using, let me know. What unit would you reconsider, or would you call in to make sure that this area is secure? The pip here is unfortunately out of ammo. These cargoes might come into the town to resupply the infantry, but I think they're going to go towards the pip to make sure it can keep firing. Problem here, it is still active. Don't keep an empty AA platform active, because it is still a radiation source. And radiation sources get targeted by seaplanes. So make sure whether your AA is empty or not, turn it off if you're not using it. It's just that much safer. In the meanwhile, Red 4 is pushing up, and they're pushing up with some of the best infantry that they have to offer, Spetsnaz. Now, US Marines and Navy SEALs are not bad units. They're some of the best that Blue 4 has, but they cannot stand up to Spetsnaz. Units that can stand up to Spetsnaz is virtually anything that has more than 1 point of armor, because the RPO Rice is only an HE weapon. It is not going to do a lot of damage to infantry, or sorry, to vehicles that have a bit of armor. You can see that they did manage to get an airstrike in here, but the damage is done really. Red 4 has made it across. They have VDV in these buildings. They have Sapperies in the other buildings, engaging the Royal Marine. Sorry, I keep saying Royal Marines. These guys are just US Marines. They're not that good. Engaging the US Marines with the RPO Rice. They're not as effective as Spetsnaz, but don't consider these guys anything less than extremely dangerous for your infantry. Light Riflemen are still engaging troops with those Super Dragons, trying to thin out the transports that are supporting the VDVs here. But there's just a lot of VDVs for 14 Marines here. So hopefully the LVTPs can help out a little bit, or otherwise... I believe I saw a napalm tank a while back. That thing must have already gotten killed. Again, the question, how would you get rid of the VDVs in here? Provided that you can see that the first bombing run that they did here was quite successful. There's probably not a lot of AA. And the area might be difficult to reach with tanks, because you're going to have to be right about there for a tank to have a good line of sight on the VDV. So personally, in this situation I would bring more infantry, although infantry on infantry is usually going to get messy and very, very heavy on your supplies. So a napalm tank could be interesting here, or just airstrikes. Or if you have access to them, little birds. Those little helicopters with their grenade launchers, people usually don't expect them, but they are heavily effective, or greatly effective against VDVs here. Interesting use here of the LAV. The LAV is amphibious, and it's quite fast. 45 kph amphibious is not bad for an amphibious unit. So you saw that this thing did not just come up the road, it drove from Bravo across the water, floating in, and then unfortunately getting killed right away. And look at that kill, by the way. Su-27PU got killed off by the Hawk there. I am a bit worried about that Hawk. But again, Red 4 does not have any reconnaissance here, and otherwise they would have spotted this Hawk right away. Anyway, LAV floating across, keep that in mind. If your unit is amphibious, a river like this won't stop it. So you have more options than you normally would. Cargo trucks here are now getting engaged by the T-62. Again, not sure why he's using a T-62. They're quite terrible tanks. Low accuracy, low rate of fire. Really the only good thing about this tank is the Arcan. That HGM that it has on there. Let's see, anything else? Yep, we got a Hornet coming in. It's probably going to try and snipe that tank. It's on a direct intercept course. And missiles away, 70% accuracy, tank destroyed, get it out. No AA response whatsoever from Red 4. Do they have absolutely nothing here? Yeah, they got one Strela out here pretty much up front and one in the back there. And that's it. They got no long-range radar-guided AA. Tunguska there, anti-helo, but they're not that good against airplanes. So Red 4 is really slacking here in the middle. They don't have a lot that can stop the very, very dangerous airstrikes that Blue 4 is sending in. Especially now that they lost their Su-27PU. Over here, unfortunately, the recon unit has died and the Fallschirmjäger are running as fast as they can. You do not want to engage a large group of infantry out there in the open. At short range, the Fallschirmjäger have a decent chance of making it out, or even killing off the enemy units. But at short range, not so much. Or at long range, not so much. Interesting though, they did manage to capture a Kolos. So they can actually resupply themselves should they need to. And they can even get reinforcements from that Kolos, and it has a ton of supplies. You can keep infantry operational for quite a long while by just having a Kolos nearby. So well played there by the 19th Panzer Grenadier Division. A couple of cargoes are pushing back towards the CH-53G to get resupplied. I frequently talk about this in my decks, but it's not often that I see people do it. I use this as a sort of forward supply station. You deliver these supplies onto the cargoes. Cargoes then push across the bridge and either resupply the Hawk or anything that's in this town. This is the right way to do it, as far as I'm concerned. If you would try to land that 53G there, you only have a very, very expensive fireball waiting to happen at 85 points. You're going to lose a lot of supplies, and it is risky to move across that bridge, because you don't know what kind of infrared AA Red 4 has in there. There is of course a way to find out. You can go across here with a seaplane, trying to lure out any kind of radar AA or infrared AA that might be firing at you. It's a way to find out if there is a threat. If there isn't, you can just try pushing across with a helicopter, but this is definitely the safer way of doing it. And of course, once the 53 is empty, send it back to the FOB. Let's see where... Oh, there's only one FOB, no, two FOBs in the game. And with that, you can just keep these guys going. Anyway, we got a BTRT pushing up, and Red 4 is slowly but steadily driving Blue 4 out of this town. They got more Sapperies in here. They got VDVs. VDVs are engaging and quite effectively killing off the LVTP. And again, due to the lack of recon on both sides, they are pretty much door to door without knowing it. Now the only valuable or really applicable recon unit that I would use here is a Recon Cobra, somewhere along here, to try and spot stuff. Other recon, rangers would be useful, but I don't think that you get access to rangers in a navy deck or in a marines deck. So you're going to have to either use SEALs or reconnaissance vehicles. And reconnaissance vehicles, of course, are not the safest option either. Red 4 here is pushing up with quite a few forces, and for most of these marines, it's surprising that they're still alive. They are dying, definitely sure of that, but there's a lot more of them here than I had expected. I'd expected that most of these guys would already be dead. And this is really when you need to start bringing in a lot more infantry. You see that you're dealing with 27 Motostrelkis. Airstrikes like the one by the Harrier might not be enough. And unfortunately the Harrier did get killed there, as well as the Prowler. So they got a lot more infrared AA here that the Prowler cannot tackle, and that can kill off both of their aircraft. Now Crazy Ivan surrendered. And we already saw that Flint GG surrendered, so I suppose that was not really that much of a GG. Assault engineers running out of ammo, but they are effectively killing off the Motostrelki. You can see how effective that M202 flash really is. They are exceptional at killing off infantry, but they're going to really struggle killing off the BMP-1Ds and the BTRTs. Fortunately, we got other units to take care of that. Stone Shade, I think, tried to do a bombing run or a rocket run here. And this is what happened to his plane. So airstrikes are completely out of the question. They now have an FAV here, recon unit, so they have a bit of visuals. They can keep eyes on these transports as they're moving about. And these things are getting absolutely hammered by the small teams and the marines up here. But it's only one guy with a small left. So if this guy gets hit one more time, he's going to lose that entire infantry group. And he's pulling it back as fast as he can. So you can see it's really a back and forth. It's almost a dance between Red 4 and Blue 4 trying to struggle for control of this town. On the one hand, I find these battles always quite interesting. On the other hand, I suppose you could say, why bother? If Red 4 wants to have this town so bad and it's not very heavily strategic value, it doesn't have a strategic value, why bother? Just try to surround the enemy or go around the flanks, like for example out here in Alpha. And I think Alpha still has absolutely nothing. You can see it's just a very, very weak position here. So if Blue 4 was actually scouting this area, and I'm not blaming Maverick for this side because he's very heavily engaged here, micromanaging anything he can get his hands on. But the 59th Panzer or the 19th Panzer Regiment, Panzer Grenadier Regiment, could have scouted around here. It could have killed off the recon or the infantry here. Could have completed a recon run around and tried to just come in along the flanks here, killing off this command vehicle, which completely neutralizes Red 4. It's going to be very, very dangerous or difficult for Red 4 to recapture Foxtrot, especially if you're coming in with a bit of helicopters with more reconnaissance, as well as infantry that can hold this town. And the best way, the ideal way, would be to then flush in or quickly try to land a command unit, like a command infantry, into one of these buildings, so you can start bringing in Blue 4 resupplies from the rear, which either will inflict extreme casualties along Red 4, because you can start dealing damage to their artillery, or it will cause the Red 4 players to quit right away, which may not always be the best way to win a battle, but it wins battles. And in the end, that is what we're looking for. We're looking for that win. So, that was a bit of a long discussion on how he shouldn't be in this town. The point I'm trying to make, if you have a more effective way of defeating the enemy rather than try to go force on force like he's doing up here, use it. Go for it. Try to find smarter ways of killing the enemy. Because force on force is only going to cost you a lot of time, a lot of attention, because he's going to have to constantly juggle this infantry as well as supplies, and it's going to cost you a ton of units. Anyway, back to Maverick and Blue 4. You can see that without recon they have absolutely no idea what's going on here. Red 4 is moving in with more and more and more troops. But Blue 4 just cannot see them, even with an FAV in here, and this thing has exceptional optics. So we're constantly fighting reconnaissance versus stealth values here, and currently the stealth values of Red 4 are winning. As points go, Blue 4 is ahead by 600 points and a little bit of change. And I gotta say credits to the Red 4 guys, because they are now dealing with a very, very long front. The actual front, I suppose you could say, is this side. They have to pay a bit of attention to this side to make sure that Blue 4 doesn't ambush them there. And otherwise maybe defend this strip and hotel. The rest of it is going on in here, but they have to do it with 2 guys, and they're still fighting and they're still getting points. So compliments to Red 4, to I believe it's Kriegsmarine and Axion. These guys are doing their best to fend off 4 players, and it's not easy. It gets on your nerves, it gets to be a more intense fight, and most people just start to quit out at that stage, but not these guys, so kudos there, well done. We got some more LVTP 7A1s with infantry. Always go with 2 groups of infantry, not 4. If you have 4 groups of infantry in a building, it's either a major target, as well as it's not that effective, because only 2 groups of the 4 groups of infantry that are inside a building will fire at any one time, especially with their anti-tank weapon. For some reason, they just cannot fire all at the same time. So don't bother about these large groups of infantry, especially since they are Marines. These are probably worth, say, 25 points apiece per infantry group. Actually, I've got a group here. 30 points even. So this is 120 points of infantry. 1 well-placed napalm strike or 1 good bombing run. And here comes it one. This is going to hurt them. 1 good bombing run and you're going to be out of business. You're going to have lost 120 points. And that was quite a good bombing run by Red 4. They did lose 1 bomber in the process, but Blue 4 only really lost 1 group of Marines, 90 there. So not as effective as I would have thought, but a good follow-up here by Axion. And he's pushing it with VZ Kari 90 versus US Marines, which are heavily panicked due to that bombing run. So they're not going to be as effective as calm shock troops, such as the VZ Kari 90. You can see that the small is trying to help out as best it can, and that does do panic damage to them, or stun damage. They're slowly but steadily losing this battle, and the Marines are pushing up. Now you can see that he is risking to bring a CH-53 in here, and to my surprise it's not taking any fire. But if Red 4 would have had 1 unit of AA infantry in there, it would have killed off that helicopter. Caused it to go down right on top of the smalls, creating a big blast, which would have panicked the smalls, done damage to them, possibly panicked the Marines, which are already panicked, so it wouldn't get any worse there. And of course this is bad news. By the effectiveness, I'd say that was not a Buratino. Yeah, it was a small salvo from the Buratino. It's not done yet. It only fired off half its rockets. So Red 4 is now saying, okay, screw it. If you're not going to have the town, if I'm not going to have the town, you're not going to have it either. And he's trying to force Blue 4 back, either over these bridges or into the water. And that's what's happening. And you can see that this group of 60, or actually 120 Marines, which was in here, 60 Marines that was in here, has now been reduced to half, as well as all taking damage. So very, very dangerous maneuver here with this large infantry group. Splitting them up across 2 buildings would be slightly better here. And you can see that even though we're still looking at a 2v4, Red 4 is only still 700 points ahead, or behind, so they're not losing that badly. And I don't see either team getting to 8,000 points within the next 6 minutes. So let's see how they're going to play this. For some reason Blue 4 on the left flank isn't pushing either. They are now starting to scout with a Cayuse, getting some reconnaissance infantry. Let's see what Red 4 has in here. Oh yeah, they got a solid line here. ATGMs, although they're out of ammo. More ATGMs, infantry, AA, Tungushka, heavy AA. A lot of infantry that they just decided not to unload in this town. But it's backed up by T-64 BV. And now you can see they dropped off all the infantry here. So it's not going to be easy pushing around here. Except the Blue 4 has already done it. Again. Again with the sneaky recon helicopter, or the sneaky drop-off helicopter, that the 53G is. He managed to sneak all the way around, and he's trying to drop off this infantry. Another group of BGS. Now another reason why I don't particularly like the BGS here is that the BGS, let's see where are they, is not particularly fast. You can see that these guys only move at 15 kph. That's because they're militia training. If you have these units at higher veterancy, or sorry, if you have more advanced reconnaissance infantry like the Fern Spayers, you run less of a risk of being detected, as well as a lot faster infantry unit. You're looking at either 25 or 30 kph. So you're going to take a lot less time traversing this entire woods here to get to a spot where you can actually see something. Now this is looking promising here. Use of smoke. ATGMs are done. They probably tried sacrificing transports. And the 19th Panzer Grenadier Division again is pushing across with more infantry. Considering there are just 113s, I'm thinking that these are not the best infantry. They're just Jaegers, but the smoke managed to keep them safe. That T-62 could have caused all sorts of troubles for this group of infantry here. And they can now start to push in on Red 4 here. If they can get an opening here, if they can capture this town, put some ATGMs in it, they have a solid position to neutralize the command here, neutralize the tanks, and slowly but steadily push into the flank of Red 4 there. Maverick here on the right is bringing in quite a few more forces. 4 V-150s, which are all elite, and they are now going to get hit by an ATGM. I think these are SEALs, but this transport got hit so bad that all the SEALs inside died. And there's another hit and another group of SEALs that went up in flames. Yep, there's another one. Oh, sorry, it's Deltas, it's not SEALs. He lost a lot of Delta and a lot of V-150s in that assault. So again, Maverick, if you're watching, and I think that you will be, smoke, smoke, smoke. Smoke is always the answer. If you want to push with Delta Force, good move, go for it. But smoke this line of buildings first. Because this way, you're just going to get your troops heavily panicked or killed. And that is the thing that you saw here. You got them killed. Let's see how it's going on in the north. We got the BGS, which are, as mentioned, very, very slowly traversing this ridge line. I think it's going to take them at least another 4 minutes real time before they actually get to the other side, just because they're so slow. In the meanwhile, 19th Panzergren here is doing a very, very good job pushing across. I'm not sure why this guy only has 1200 points. I think it's mostly because he has a holding position here, he's not getting attacked, and he's trying to do flanking maneuvers with either recon units in helicopters or recon helos themselves. But other than that, I think it's a decent player, by the way that he's trying to find openings in the enemy lines and actually getting them too. And it seems that Blue 4 is now suddenly jumping ahead in points. They're looking at 5600 versus 4500. So they're now 1100 points ahead, 1200 by now. And with only a couple minutes left on the clock, I think that is what's going to be the end of the game. I think Red 4 is going to surrender slightly before that time. But I doubt that Blue 4 is going to make it to 8000 points in another 2 minutes. Let's see what happens here. This is another 100 points, that's nice to have. You can see that blue 4 is just pushing and pushing and pushing. Red 4 only has Fox, Charlie and Alpha here, and that's it. They lose those, they're done. Quite a bit of artillery can. Don't smirch a building with infantry. You're going to panic the infantry, but you're not going to kill any of them. Don't smirch a unit here. Infantry cannot be hit by those. SGRFs versus Spetsnaz. Spetsnaz should be at a disadvantage, but for some reason they're still doing quite a bit of damage to them. Now let's see. Maverick here. As stated, he went into the meat grinder, and he lost quite a lot of infantry forces here. That's probably his biggest loss in the middle of the map. Panzergren only did 1335 points in in kills, and 600 points in losses. He was mostly a holding force. Stone Shade seemed to be a support force with a lot of capture points, and Psy actually was feeding them a little bit. Let's see how the other guys were doing. Crazy Ivan left pretty early on, and Axion and Kriegsmarine, they fought bravely, but they got a ton of units from their allies that they really weren't expecting. So considering the circumstances, these guys actually did pretty damn well. So tip of the hat to those guys. Well done for not leaving right away. Anyway, a few things to take away from this game. Try flanking. Use recon and find gaps in the enemy lines. If your position is being heavily contested by the enemy, and if they keep bringing in reinforcements there, then they are not bringing in reinforcements somewhere else. If you can find that position, you're golden. You can push through. You can find the gaps, and you can use them to either use helicopter pushes, airstrikes, or reconnaissance strikes with an artillery follow-up. Do that, and you're going to be using a lot more intelligence or effective kill-death ratios to accomplish your objectives. Let me know if you have any more comments on this game. I look forward to it below. Again, let me know what you would like me to do with the podcast, if you'd like me to do that. I'm going to put a comment below this video. Just like it if you want me to also put the War Room video as a MP3 file. With that, it's the end of the video. Hope you enjoyed it. If you did, hit like, and I'll be seeing you in the next one. Cheers.